Hello, and in this tutorial, we're going to implement the prepend method for our linked list. Now, in the case of prepend, we have two cases: when our linked list is empty and when it's not empty. So case 1 is the empty list, and right here is what we have when we initialize our object. This is essentially our constructor. So remember, we left off with header referencing a dummy node and last node referencing a dummy node. Now, what I want is to link the dummy node and n being the newly created node that we want to prepend to the list. So how would we do that? Well, header is always going to be the reference to the dummy node. So this has no data in it. And header.next is always going to reference the first element in our list, which would be n in this case, because we want to add n to our linked list. And what will happen to last node? Well, last node is just going to reference n because n is our last node. It's our only node, so it has no choice but to be that. So let's implement case 1. We're going to do public void prepend. And what do we want? Data. So integer data. We're going to create a new node, n, and we're just going to pass in data. Right? Now we said we had two test cases, when the list is empty and when it's not empty. So if size is equal to 0, right? Because size is keeping track of our linked list, the number of elements in our linked list. So size is equal to 0, else that. So first case, if size is equal to 0, what do we want to happen? Well, header is already referencing the dummy node, and it will always reference the dummy node. So how do I get this to link up with this, to reference n? This is pretty straightforward, looking at the image. Header.next is going to reference the newly created node. Now, looking at this image, what's the next step? Last node has to reference the newly inserted node. So, last node reference n. And that's it. That is case 1. But we have to add one more step. We have to increment the size, because we just inserted a new node into our linked list. So let's take a look at the second case scenario. Now, the second case scenario involves a non-empty linked list. So right now we have this. We want to prepend n. So what do we have to do in order to include n into our linked list? Well, this is fairly simple. Header.next references n, and n references the previous last node. So let's take a look at this. First, we have to create a temporary value. So node temp is assigned header.next. Now you might say, why do I need this temporary value? Because I need to save the reference to this node. So header.next has a reference to this node. What's the next step? header.next is now referencing the newly created node. Header.next reference n. You see that n is up here. Now what's the next step? Well, let's take a look at this. N.next is now referencing what header.next used to reference. You take a look here. Well, what did header.next used to reference? The value in our temp. So n.next reference temp. And finally, we can increase the size of our linked list. And that is it. We successfully created the prepend method for our linked list.